So far today, in political terms, we've heard from the Premier and from the Minister, Rob Stokes, who wears many, many hats. Now time for a man from Canberra who also wears many hats, and I'm going to say probably more hats. So please welcome the Federal Minister for Communications, Urban Infrastructure, Cities and the Arts, the Honourable Paul Fletcher.
Well, good afternoon everybody, and it's great to be here at BOOMTOWN. Entirely appropriate term given how Western Sydney is booming, and I want to talk about what the Morrison government is doing, working with the Perrottet government to sustain that boom for decades to come. We've got an ambitious $110 billion infrastructure program across the country, and one of the biggest elements of that plan is our policy agenda for Western Sydney, and at the heart of that is the Western Sydney International Nancy Bird Walton Airport. The airport and the neighbouring Aerotropolis are the centrepiece of the Western Parkland city, and that in turn is the focus of a huge and multifaceted effort across Commonwealth, state and local government, including land use planning, new transport infrastructure, attracting businesses and jobs to the area, and much else besides. And this effort across all levels of government is coordinated in a number of ways, including through the Western Sydney City Deal. Today I'd like to update you on progress at the airport, to speak about the national economic boost that the project will deliver, and finally I want to discuss the airport as part of the community within which it will operate. So let me turn first to the airport itself. This $5.3 billion project is already more than 1/4 complete. The bulk earthworks is now 3/4 complete. Nearly 22 million cubic metres of earth have been moved. The contract for construction of the terminal has been awarded to Multiplex, and recently I joined the Prime Minister and the Premier at the site to mark the commencement of construction on the terminal. This will be a very important public building for Western Sydney, and it has been designed to reflect the confidence and aspirations of Western Sydney. It will offer a passenger experience unmatched in any other Australian airport. For example, the terminal will have Australia's first fully digitally automated baggage handling system, with passengers able to track their bags via an app to know exactly when those bags will arrive at the pickup destination. The contract for the airside pavements package, which will include the 3.7 kilometre runway and the rapid exit taxiways, was awarded recently to CPB Contractors and Acciona Joint Venture, with construction to commence next year. By the end of this year, the final major construction contract for landside civil and building works will be awarded along with the enterprise technology package. The airport is on track to open by late 2026, and by 2032 it's expected to be serving around 10 million passengers a year. Building the physical facility is only part of the job. At the same time, the airport's management team is working hard to attract potential users. Airlines are showing strong interest, the major domestic airlines, but also some 30 foreign operators. There's also strong interest from the freight industry in Western Sydney International's air cargo precinct. Here too, the proposition includes modern, efficient operating practices. The freight industry is also attracted by the airport's location, close to the fastest growing area of Sydney and to myriad logistics hubs, including Moorebank Intermodal, and the airport's excellent connectivity, with billions of dollars being spent by the Morrison government and the Berejiklian government on upgraded road infrastructure. The centrepiece of this road infrastructure will be the new $2 billion M12 motorway that will connect the M7 via Elizabeth Drive to the airport from the east and connect the Northern Road to the airport from the west. The M12 is being delivered under the Western Sydney Infrastructure Plan, a $4.4 billion 10-year program of works delivering new and upgraded roads across Western Sydney, jointly funded by the Morrison and Perrottet governments. And just last month, we announced the completion, a year ahead of schedule, of another centrepiece of the plan, the $1.6 billion Northern Road project, providing now a continuous 36-kilometre dual carriageway from Narellan to Penrith. Let me turn now to the economic boost the airport will trigger in Western Sydney and beyond. I've mentioned the effort being put into marketing Western Sydney Airport to airlines. If the airport attracts airlines and passengers, it will in turn generate jobs, an estimated 28,000 by 2031. It will attract businesses to locate nearby, and it will catalyse regional and national economic activity. One way it will achieve this is by stimulating new levels of competition in domestic and international aviation, in turn bringing benefits to passengers and to the freight market and flow-on benefits across our economy. If you want to operate a domestic airline, but you do not have strong access to the Sydney market, you are starting from a very weak position. Western Sydney Airport will change that. Another economic lever will be through the impact on Australia's export industries. The cargo precinct at the airport will provide capacity for operators to meet the growing demand for freight in the Sydney Basin. This, combined with access to 24/7 operations, will help our high-quality Australian exports to access global markets, from medical equipment to live seafood production and much other besides. We expect more than 220,000 tonnes of air cargo to move through the airport each year. This new airport will also stimulate inbound tourism, particularly by offering an attractive new option to international low-cost carriers. Today, airlines flying into Kingsford Smith can face the prospect of leaving an aircraft on the ground for much of the day due to the curfew. This is poor asset utilisation of $100 million plus aircraft. At Western Sydney International, there will be no such barrier. I've spoken about the various ways in which Western Sydney International Airport will boost economic activity and enhance productivity and efficiency. Central to this is unleashing the power of competition. We're applying lessons from industries like telecommunications, where since 1990 there's been intense competition, innovation and investment from multiple players, mostly privately owned, and it's no accident that the chair of Western Sydney Airport is Paul O'Sullivan, the former Chief Executive of Optus. A good example of our approach to competition is the 75,000 square metre cargo precinct at the airport. This will feature open access cargo terminals rather than being locked up by any one operator. This makes more sense commercially for the airport. It also boosts competition and hence productivity in the air freight market. Finally, let me turn to the contribution of the airport to improved livability for the people of Western Sydney. The airport is a catalyst for transformational investments in public transport. Sydney Metro Western Sydney Airport will be the rail spine for the Western Parkland City, a 23-kilometre metro rail line to run from St Mary's south to the Aerotropolis through 4 intermediate stations, including 2 at the airport, funded jointly by the Morrison and Perrottet governments at a cost of nearly $11 billion. Each of these stations can be surrounded by carefully planned centres featuring public spaces, job-generating investment and education opportunities, medium and high-density housing, shops, cafes and restaurants and other facilities. This rail link is a rare example of doing what all the experts advise. Get the transport links in place in time for the new jobs and housing, rather than leaving transport to be an afterthought. Now, of course, the airport will itself make a major contribution to the livability of Western Sydney by making flying much easier for the people of Western Sydney. If it were a standalone city, Western Sydney would be the 4th largest city and the 3rd largest economy in Australia. An airport servicing this region is long overdue. It is absurd that a family from Bankstown going on a trip to the Gold Coast or Hobart has to spend longer driving to the airport than flying to their destination. Of course, it's also key to the livability of Western Sydney that the airport is a good neighbour. So I turn finally to airspace and flight path design, which are naturally a focus of interest to surrounding communities. The airspace and flight path design is on track to be completed prior to the commencement of airport operations in 2026. It's a technically complex and intricate process that takes considerable time. There are multiple factors to consider. The first and overriding factor is safety. This cannot be compromised in any way. But then there are such factors as minimising the kilometres travelled and fuel burned by aircraft, the impact on communities around the airport, including from aircraft noise, minimising other environmental impacts, for example, on the Blue Mountains World Heritage Area, and of course, ensuring that the flight paths for Western Sydney Airport do not interfere with other airspace requirements in the Sydney Basin. The Sydney Basin is already a highly congested airspace. It includes Australia's busiest airport, Kingsford Smith, 2 general aviation airports and a range of defence facilities, including the Richmond RAF base. In designing the flight paths and airspace for Western Sydney International Airport, we have to work very carefully to take account of all of the existing uses of airspace. A critical element of the airspace and flight path design is extensive community consultation. This began with the draft environmental impact statement issued in 2015, a set of documents totalling more than 4,000 pages, which included a set of indicative flight paths. Almost 5,000 comments were received, and these were reflected in the final environmental impact statement and also in the airport plan issued in 2016. The airport plan sets out several critical requirements imposed by government that have to be met as we move through the design process. These include avoiding overflight of residential areas and noise-sensitive facilities to the maximum extent possible, prohibiting a single aircraft arrival merge point over any one residential area, considering the impacts of air operations on natural and visually sensitive areas, including the Blue Mountains World Heritage Area, and developing appropriate noise abatement procedures to ensure that affected residents are impacted as little as possible. One example of possible noise abatement measures is the use of continuous descent operations for aircraft arrivals. This means aircraft can effectively fly from the top of their descent to the runway without levelling off, which means less noise is produced. In all of the detailed airspace and flight path planning work presently occurring, my department, working with Air Services Australia, the Civil Aviation Safety Authority and other stakeholders, is taking careful account of the community feedback received through the environmental impact statement process that is enshrined in the airport plan. Critically, there will be another detailed, formal community consultation process as part of the environmental assessment process for the preliminary airspace design. Once the preliminary designs have been developed, they will be referred to the Minister for Environment for advice on the method and guidelines for conducting the environmental assessment under the Environmental Protection and Biodiversity Conservation Act. And this triggers the commencement of the environmental assessment process. That process includes, amongst a range of matters, developing detailed noise modelling so that we can assess community impacts, and it will require the preparation of thousands of pages of documents as submissions in the environmental assessment process. We expect that this documentation will be ready and the noise modelling and associated environmental impact assessments will be ready to be shared with the community, along with the preliminary airspace and flight path design by mid-2023. It will be an opportunity for the community to provide its comment and feedback on the flight paths before we undertake the next phase of detailed design to finalise the airspace and flight path designs for consideration by the Civil Aviation Safety Authority. The planning work and the modelling has as a key input assumptions as to the aircraft types expected to fly to and from the airport on the flight paths and how often. While the noise modelling will include louder aircraft, it's important to note those are progressively being phased out in favour of quieter and more efficient next generation aircraft. And as aircraft technology continues to improve and older aircraft are replaced with newer models over time, noise will be reduced. In addition to direct community feedback, I've established the Forum on Western Sydney Airport, which includes representation from local community members, the aviation sector, local industry representatives, local council officers, New South Wales government officials, and members of local, state and federal government from across the political spectrum. And in addition to the broader process of consulting with the public, there will be detailed engagement with FAUSA on the next stage of the flight path design. And I must particularly acknowledge the local community members of FAUSA who've been proactive in putting forward concerns from their communities concerning matters such as flight paths, but also the broader issue of how best to secure the maximum economic and social benefit from the new airport for the communities of Western Sydney. I conclude by reiterating that Western Sydney International Airport is not just another infrastructure project. It forms the central piece of a major piece of policy architecture, spanning economic policy, including competition policy and regional development. The airport is the core of a bold social and economic vision across 3 levels of government for the Western Parkland city. To turn the vision into reality, the airport needs to be a success as a business, as an attractor of investment, and just as important, as a community facility and a good neighbour. Given the enormous and multi-stranded effort underway, as I've sought to explain today, I'm very confident that vision will be realised. Thank you.
Thank you, Minister. I had the great pleasure of being asked to sit on a panel to choose that airport site by the bloke speaking this afternoon, and its airport's been led by the bloke just speaking now. All 3 of us went to Sydney Uni together. How appropriate, therefore, that I asked the Vice-Chancellor of Sydney Uni, Professor Mark Scott, to propose a vote of thanks to Minister Fletcher.
Well, thanks, Chris, and thanks, Minister. I know I stand between BOOMTOWN and lunch, so the Minister will understand if I'm brief. Look, I had high expectations of the Minister because he didn't just attend Sydney University. He has a first-class honours degree, Chris, in economics and law from the University of Sydney, and the Minister didn't disappoint today. For a period of time in my career, I was an editor at the Sydney Morning Herald, and every 3 months or so, we'd make a front page story that said a decision on the Western Sydney Airport was imminent. It was due within days. We'd run that story 3 or 4 times a year over the best part of a decade. But it all proved to be just too hard, too complex, too overwhelming. And I think, if you can summarise the Minister's address today in 3 words, those 3 words are, it is happening. And what you could hear from the Minister was the way that he is working with his federal colleagues, state government, local government, with experts, many of whom are assembled in the room, in dealing with all the complexity that vast piece of city building decision making entails. And we heard from him about the economic development opportunities that exist, the extraordinary planning around transport infrastructure that develops, and I think significantly a great focus of his time was on the noise issue and the impact on livability that the airport will bring, and thinking in advance of those issues. And it's another memory of mine of being editor of the Herald, where the 3rd runway at Sydney seemed to be a wonderful, at Mascot seemed to be a wonderful idea until it actually opened, and then the full noise questions really came to bear. The ability to anticipate those issues in advance, to work intensively with the local community, to engage around how they can be best addressed in advance. We heard a lot about that today. The Minister is a busy man. He's Minister for Communities, Urban Infrastructure, Cities and the Arts. When you want something done, you give it to a busy person to do. Minister, thank you for taking time out of your busy day to address us all. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Minister. Scott, the Premier also asked me to say you good for half of the Leppington Link and Castlereagh connection. He asked me to ask you when you were here, so... Can I pass you back to Rowan, let you go and have some lunch? One little logistic apology to you all. The rules under which we operate mean that you're all, and I'm meant to be, wearing a mask through today, and also we have to have bottled water on the table for you at all times. I'm telling you, this might be great. Go home, turn the tap on, drink city water. It's cheaper, better, and better for the environment. So, endure. We all have public health orders to live under. Thank you. Rowan, tell them how to get to lunch.
Thank you. I will do that. Christopher, I was also going to mention, as Mark mentioned, the airport was on the front page of the Herald and 3 or 4 times a year. According to an article in the SMH by Matt O'Sullivan, it was first mooted in 1946. So that is only 75 years ago. Ladies and gentlemen, it is lunchtime. It'll be served in the room where you had your morning tea across the other side. Stick around for a drink at the end of today. That's just after Controversy Corner. We're with our very own Rex Moss of Adam Leto. We've also got an address from Federal Opposition Leader Anthony Albanese coming up immediately after lunch. That's 2:20. Go and get some lunch. We'll see you back here at 2:20.
They all got the same heartbeat, but hers is falling behind. Nothing in this world could ever bring them down. Yeah, they're